What is the single most important thing for a meaningful life? And how do we discover what that might be? Welcome to Word for the Week, Season 2, Episode 48. Today we explore what is truly the most important thing in life, and we'll use Christmas to help us. So, how'd you come up with this focus for Christmas?
Well, it all started back in 1869.
So you've been thinking about this for a long time.
Long time. But honestly, for a backstory for any visitors who may be not as familiar with Canaan, our church was originally founded in 1869. So we started this out, call it a semi-tradition, where we revisit the very first Christmas. We even get in period clothing and such. And alas, this year wasn't meant to be. I just find this crazy. Here we are at -8 or whatever at the moment, and by next Sunday it'll be 55. But I just take that as God saying no.
Yeah, I know. With the flash freeze warning and frigid temperatures, we just decided to go on the side of caution and celebrate Canaan's Christmas online this year.
Yep, and since it takes time to pull together, a full webcast, we really had to decide early in order to make something worthwhile happen. So that's what we did. We pulled the trigger fairly early, and we're pulling together all the content, which should be some great stuff.
So instead of meeting Christmas Eve and Christmas Day at the church, we'll be here online Saturday at 6:30 instead.
That is correct. And we're hoping to do one big event and kind of roll Christmas Eve and Christmas Day all into one, and we've got a lot of folks participating, so it should be a good one.
In fact, everybody can participate because besides the music and readings, people are encouraged to call and text Christmas blessings during the live webcast.
The one thing about planning a message since 1869 and said in 1869.
You've been around a long time.
I've been around. I'm older than I look. Said in 1869, but, here we're in the advantage of the 21st century. Mm-hmm. It sets up this large vista of time looking over a century and a half, basically. And I was rather awed by the thought, that if we were able to actually have been over there doing our period thing, if we were over there and we had a time machine and we were able to wind back the Christmases, just think, we could be standing in the very same space, in the very same structure, and wind it back and still be within those same walls all the way back to 1869. So there's a large time invested in there. So.
Mm-hmm. And of course, a few things would change, like cold flues on the walls. And I believe the floor was flat in the original sanctuary.
Yeah, in the original sanctuary, I believe that was flat. And of course, there were wooden pews. There were no babies back in those days.
No padding.
No padding. And all in all, there would really be something to see. And even though we could be standing in pretty much the same building within the walls, just imagine once we opened the doors and went outside, we'd be stepping into an entirely different world out there. So.
Yeah, we were looking through newspapers from 1869 just to get a feel of everyday life at the time.
Yeah, and it's really funny because things that we would wince at that seem so blunt or even today would say offensive or something, that's the way they spoke even in professional papers. Right. So we would find people with quite a different point of view. And I think the biggest sense I got as we looked through different articles was that there was a very strong sense that God and nature were in control, not so much humanity in those days.
Right. Life and death had a way of shaping the way we see things. And
right.
For example, the world suffered through six pandemics of cholera.
Yeah.
In the 19th century, smallpox, typhus, and scarlet fever ravaged the land. As a matter of fact, we have a small historic graveyard in our community, and it's sobering to see how often those diseases are mentioned up on the tombstones.
Yeah, I mean that was life, and they wouldn't have even dreamt about a cure for a lot of these things.
Right.
It would be 6 decades before even the most primitive antibiotics were discovered. As a matter of fact, the idea of antibiotic wouldn't have even existed.
Right.
So they would have seen life and death in quite a different way. And quite frankly, they just would take for granted just living was a very, very risky proposition.
Right. I was amazed at an article on how people had died. There was a pair of young boys killed by a family horse that went wild, and another story of how a young mother died while shielding her child from a falling oil lamp. And there were quite a few deaths due to open flame appliances.
Yeah, and they wouldn't. And I'll tell you, when you read
They're just matter of fact kind of how...
Exactly. When they explained this stuff, it was very matter of fact. And people died in some pretty tough ways back in those days. And like we say, it gave them obviously a different life view of things.
Right.
And of course, as we talked, a lot of these injuries, this is what I found interesting, a lot of the injuries, it would say, and they died after the fact. So, because, I mean...
There's a lot of suffering.
Well, and there wasn't the medicine. That was the thing. The medicine wasn't there.
Yeah.
But medicine wasn't the only thing. When you think of it, the 19th century, we're winding up big time in industrialization. But technology overall was really in its infancy, from our standpoint.
Right.
For example, it's interesting to think that there was no human flying machine in the air. I mean, that... At the most, they might have dreamt about it, and they came up with some pretty crazy inventions.
Right.
But it would be 34 years before even the first primitive attempt at flying.
Right.
So
imagine telling them that today not only can we fly faster than sound, but even we left footprints on the moon. I mean, I'd love to see their faces. And then there's communication technology. Do you know when the first transatlantic cable was laid?
As a matter of fact, I do, because I cheated before this program. But I found this interesting. The cable was laid in 1858, but it was 4 years for them to get that cable down. And apparently, when the original cable was put down, it only worked right for 3 weeks.
Can you imagine? Oh, my goodness. And the cable only carried a telegraph signal. And guess how long it took to get a signal from New York to London?
Well, this is something that gets me, is that it seems to me, at the most, it should only take a few seconds, at the most a few minutes, because, impedance and signal loss and all that good stuff. So, a few minutes would be the guess.
Well, I'm not sure of all the stuff that's involved, but it took them 16 hours.
The only thing slow... The only thing slower than that is my email. Somehow I get email 16 hours later.
Well, can you imagine telling the people of 1869 how we can bring up data from anywhere in the world in microseconds?
Well, and not only anywhere in the world, telling them that, we were talking about flight, that we can also, from outer space, bring up a picture from across the world on a scale. Yeah, telling them that, I'm sure they would think we're absolutely crazy. But, the idea of life and death, that shaped their view, life and death quite differently. Technology being quite different in our day, but also social norms.
Yes.
Imagine going back to 1869 and telling them that there are no longer two genders. Now, gender is really not a biological fact, but a matter of preference. And that, in fact, we're 19 genders and growing by the day. So.
And they can even change in the same day. So I can only imagine their look of confusion.
I imagine that would be a hard one for them to swallow. Another great topic might be parenting. Like in our day, I think you were telling me, I think it was our friend Marcia, that said that somebody was going to call social services on her because she didn't teach her kids about Santa Claus or something to that effect.
Yeah, it could be. I don't.
But anyway, there was there was something like that, and the idea that you really can get in trouble just spanking a child today. where they had words like, were you familiar with that word? They say you're going to get a switching. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're not talking a light switch there. As a matter of fact, somebody told me that depending how bad it was, back in the day, they might choose the branch according to the punishment. Like
They still did that in my elementary school.
yeah, but a thinner, whippier branch as opposed
Right.
to, and of course,
Stings.
yeah, it stings, right? Or the idea of being taken to the woodshed,
Right.
that whole thing. And in their day, of course, that was simply good, firm parenting. Nobody would question it at all. So
Right.
imagine telling them about losing your kids to social services in our day.
Yeah. There's some views and values that would surely leave them speechless, I'm sure. I mean, all kinds of things.
And we started out by hitting on, it's kind of fun thinking of the difference. If we were to go back in time, we'd either be seen as prophets or more likely crazy people,
Yeah.
which makes me think, I wonder what we would think if we were to talk to somebody 150 years from now. But anyway, definitely that. But there are a lot of things that haven't changed that tend to be the same. For example, I found this amazing. Did you know there was a big anti-vaccination movement in England in 1869?
I guess some things just don't change.
Well, and what's really funny, a lot of the reasons, if you look at it, are the same that there's anti-vaxxers today. So 1869, nothing new there.
But it's not just the negative things. The idea of kindness and charity haven't really changed. For example, there was one editorial that made an impression on me. There was a lawyer from Springfield, Massachusetts, nearby me, by the name of W.R. Stearns, and at his death, he mandated that his body be wrapped in a linen sheet and buried in a cheap wooden box. And it's the reason that makes it inspiring. He wished to be buried like that because the money and the clothing could be better used for the living. And he wouldn't need it any longer. So
yeah, isn't that astounding?
as opposed to picking out,
Right. The idea, because a lawyer like that would have status,
right.
and it would have been the status of the day, but to be so socially aware, so conscious of the fact that you're willing to have this pauper's grave in order to leave more for the people who truly need it, which would, of course, be the living. So
Right.
when you look at it, no matter what age we live in, that's a pretty noble perspective on life and need.
For all the differences, people are the same at the core. People have the same needs and the same flaws. 1869 or today, people long for friendship,
Right.
struggle with pride, and even when it comes to God, people are drawn or stray from Him for the very same reasons.
Yeah, I mean, you can wrap it in different time and culture, but it comes down to basically the same things. And that was really, we're getting back to the whole idea of the Christmas message is, here was my proposal as we looked at things from the Christmas message was is the things that are most important. And by most important in life, I don't mean just what we embrace, but the things we avoid as well. The most important things to avoid or embrace are those things which do not change. And thereby saying that if we look at what was crucial in 1869, those things remain crucial and core to our day as well.
That's a good line of reasoning, but I have to ask, what does it have to do with Christmas?
Yeah, and I am glad you asked, because it does give me the opportunity to try and clarify myself. One of the greatest texts of Christmas, which ironically isn't from the time of Christ, but is a prophecy from 7 centuries before. So I thought this would work. As soon as you start reading this, of course, everybody's going to know exactly where you're coming
Isaiah
from.
9:6-7. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever.
So let me start by asking this question. Quote from the beginning of there, "Unto us a child is born." When you hear those words, what first comes to mind to you?
Oh, Christmas, definitely. Jesus in the manger.
Okay, and how about the descriptions, wonderful counselor, mighty God, Prince of Peace? What about that?
Well, I think of what Christ was destined to be, I guess.
Okay, and well said, because this is a prophecy, so destiny, and it is a messianic text, as in about the Christ. So it makes sense that's what it would be saying. But when we look at this, now I'm thinking in this huge time perspective where I did find this fun every year when we get to do it, to look at 1869 to the very Christmas that we're at. It's this huge time perspective. So the word that has come to mind most to me in this context is the word forever. His kingdom from henceforth, even forever.
Yeah, it's true. The birth of Christ isn't just about one special night. I mean, it's about God's kingdom forever.
Exactly. And as we compare what people are today to what they were in 1869, and we look at it in context to what you just read in that verse, there are two aspects of humanity that come to mind to me is this human need and nature, our need and nature. And by that I mean we have a sin nature, which dictates really whether we accept it or not, what we need most in life. And then if we look at some other scripture, it not only explains what you just read, but explains the situation that I'm talking about in need and nature.
Okay, I'll read through a number of passages to give us the biblical picture.
Yeah, here's the feel. Give us the groove.
Okay, Romans 3. As it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned away. All alike have become worthless. There's no one who does what's good. Not even one. And then Isaiah 64:6. All of us have become like something unclean, and all our righteous acts are like a polluted garment. All of us wither like a leaf, and our iniquities carry us away like the wind.
That's quite a view, isn't it? The idea of us getting carried away like dry leaves.
What was that song back in the Dust and
Dust in the Wind?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you were going folksy or not. Yeah. That's it.
And then back to Romans 7. So I discovered this law. When I want to do what's good, evil is present with me. For in my inner self I delight in God's law, but I see a different law in the parts of my body, waging war against the law of my mind and taking me prisoner to the law of sin in the parts of my body. What a wretched man I am! Who will rescue me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Right. And so we're looking at from need flaws and through need what we really want. Like you said, if we go back to 1869 or all the way back to Isaiah where you were reading, people are still limited. We're still flawed. And we still have the very same nature that we've always had. And we have always needed something or someone who transcends what we are, or we can never really break the cycle. So that's why when we read those words, unto us a child is born, it is, in effect, the greatest news in human history. This is how we get what we need most. But even at that, it's not enough, and I love this. I unabashedly steal this from Charles Spurgeon from a great Christmas message he ended with. This is the idea. It's not enough that Christ is born into the world. It really doesn't mean anything until he is born into us. Yeah.
So bottom line, in life, what's most important is important to remove from our lives. Right? And most important to strive after. So,
what are those things? You're asking me, what are those things? You're replacing a statement or a question as a statement. No problem in there. But just to point out what you say is that as I was looking at it, and you look at what is most important in life, the two of them, at first you're thinking, well, what do we need? And I was thinking, no, actually it is, what things must we avoid at all cost, then what things must we strive for at all cost.
Yeah.
And I'd like to start off by saying first, the more there are some things that are not in this list. For instance, the more things materially that we want, the more that we tend to give into the things that we indulge ourselves with, the emptier life becomes. I mean, we've seen that. But even that's nothing new to our age. Remember there was an old ancient Greek saying dealing with indulging the appetite, especially material appetite. And it was simply this. He said that to indulge yourself is like drinking seawater. The more that you drink, the thirstier you become. Yeah.
What the Bible calls sin is really our broken nature. Galatians 5 describes what that looks like. It's not just the destructive indulgences we think are fun. It's also the dark side of us, the anger and envy and selfishness, all those things.
Yeah, all the things we try and pretend are not there.
Yeah, right.
But the great thing about Galatians, in that Galatians chapter 5, and Paul's writing echoing what Christ has already, said earlier in the world. In the same chapter, he goes on to list the qualities that bring richness to life. Those things were the must avoid at all cost. Then the richness of life are things like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. Those qualities are what really make life.
Right,
That's
and of
living.
course those qualities are the fruits that come with Christ being born within.
And that's it. When the fruits of the Spirit is to say Christ born within. So here's where I go. All this stuff we were talking about, bottom line, what you asked at the very beginning, is this. The most important thing to avoid is indulging your broken spirit.
Right.
And the most important thing to embrace is the Spirit of God wherever He is moving or however He is moving in your life.
Exactly. And that's a solid message, whether it's 1869 or today.
Yeah, if it was 1869, it would be flowery language, but the same message, no question.
And just a slight change in topic as we discuss Christmas. We aren't featuring any music on this wordcast for a very good reason.
Okay, it's because of the live streaming Christmas Eve tomorrow, and I am quite excited. I put it out to some folks, and they just were delighted to very quickly provide me with video. I was surprised and impressed. So there will be lots and lots of music tomorrow, enough for even the most discriminating tastes.
And as we said, due to the weather, it's our part in keeping people safe, and we'll celebrate our Christmas Eve, Saturday, 6:30 p.m. live on Facebook.
And just so people realize, too, that it can be viewed later at their convenience on Canaan's YouTube channel. If you're not into YouTube or Facebook, you can go directly to canancommunity.org/media, and then you can get around that stuff and watch it right there directly on the website.
Right. We won't be meeting Sunday morning either in person, so we've rolled it all into one big event. So hope you can make it online tomorrow, and stay safe and have a very blessed Christmas. And we'll see you later. Bye. You can watch Word for the Week at canancommunity.org. You can also catch our live stream on Canaan Community's Facebook, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app.